Welcome to Elected. I'm your host, Luke Radel. Donald Trump has his first competitor in the 2024 race for president.
Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections. That has to change. It's time for a new generation of leadership to rediscover fiscal responsibility, secure our border, and strengthen our country, our pride, and our purpose. I'm Nikki Haley, and I'm running for president.
The Republican former governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, announced that she's running for president this week in a nearly 4-minute-long campaign announcement video. I'm telling you, these things get longer and longer each election cycle. In the video, she also talked about her experience serving as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under former President Donald Trump and how that has prepared her to take on the top job.
Some people look at America and see vulnerability. The socialist left sees an opportunity to rewrite history. China and Russia are on the march. They all think we can be bullied, kicked around. You should know this about me. I don't put up with bullies. And when you kick back, it hurts them more if you're wearing heels.
Now look, normally I would make fun of such an obviously forced canned one-liner, but considering the fact that most of our politicians these days can't even speak in complete sentences, I'll let this corny one slide. At her campaign kickoff event in Charleston, Haley pitched herself as an agent for generational change.
We won't win the fight for the 21st century if we keep trusting politicians from the 20th century. When America is distracted, the world is less safe. And today our enemies think that the American era has passed. They're wrong. America is not past our prime. It's just that our politicians are past theirs. We'll have term limits for Congress. And mandatory mental competency tests for politicians over 75 years old.
Now you'll notice that Nikki Haley specified that she wants mental competency exams for politicians over the age of 75, and that Donald Trump is 76. What a coincidence. Although, if I remember correctly, I don't think Donald Trump needs to take another mental competency exam after he took this one.
But then when you go back about 20, 25 minutes later and they say, go back to that question, they don't tell you this, go back to that question and repeat them. Can you do it? And you go, person, woman, man, camera, TV. They say, that's amazing. How did you do that? I do it because I have like a good memory, because I'm cognitively there.
But one person who might not be thinking through his words and actions very well is CNN This Morning host Don Lemon, who had this to say about Nikki Haley's announcement.
This whole talk about age makes me uncomfortable. I think it's the wrong road to go down. She says people, politicians or something are not in their prime. Nikki Haley isn't in her prime. Sorry. When a woman is considered to be in her prime in her 20s and 30s and maybe 40s.
What are you talking? Wait.
That's not according to me.
Prime for what?
It depends. I mean, it's just like prime. If you look it up, if you Google when is a woman in her prime, it'll say 20s, 30s, and 40s. I don't necessarily.
40s. Oh, I got another.
I'm not saying
decade.
I agree with that. So I think she has to be careful about saying that politicians aren't in their prime.
We need to qualify. Are you talking about prime for like childbearing, or are you talking about prime for being president?
What the facts are. Google it. Everybody at home. When is a woman in her prime? It says 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I'm just saying Nikki Haley should be careful about saying that politicians are not in their prime and they need to be in their prime when they serve, because she wouldn't be in her prime according to Google or whatever it is.
Wow, those are really sexist and ageist comments there from Don Lemon. And as an 18-year-old man, I really have a lot to say.
Hey Luke, it's Grandma. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to make a statement about Mr. Lemon. I don't know if I could because I'm just barely out of my 40s, but here goes. Don states that his comment was inartful. Well, I gotta tell you, inartful would be if you wore a hoodie with your suit on. And of course, you're on CNN This Morning. What kind of name is that? Like, who watches you? Honey, did you watch CNN This Morning? I said, no, dear, I didn't, because that Don Lemon is on. So it's been my observation in my short prime years that women in news tend to have to be in their 20s and 30s, dressed in cocktail dresses, reporting the news. Whereas men in news can be 40, 50, 60 years old, pudgy, paunch, look like they just slept in their car and their suits are all rumpled, but that's fine. But we women have to be in our prime.
Thanks, Grandma. You took the words right out of my mouth. It's obviously still very early on in the primary process, but Ambassador Haley has yet to differentiate herself on policy from her only other competitor in the race, former President Donald Trump. In fact, she's gone out of her way not to do so.
Recognize there's some daylight between you and the other declared candidate for the Republican nomination on that front.
There's some daylight between me and Joe Biden because Joe Biden was slow to the
But to
take.
be fair, Madam Ambassador, you have to win the primary. You're talking about President Biden a lot, but there are only two candidates in the Republican primary right now. It's you and your former boss.
No, and you guys are obsessed with me talking about him. But what I'll
Well, there
tell
are
you
only
is
two candidates.
it's okay. I don't kick sideways. I kick forward. And what I'm telling you is Joe Biden has not led.
Now, even though I haven't personally heard that expression before, I'm not sure the kicking forward instead of sideways strategy is going to be a viable one for Nikki Haley throughout the rest of the primary, especially since drumming on the age issue might work in a primary against just Donald Trump, but might not be as effective if someone like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis gets in the race, who's actually younger than Haley. And since Haley and Trump are the only two declared candidates in the race this early, it's fair game to ask them where the two differ on policy. And it's not, as Haley suggested, something that the left-wing media is trying to get her to do to attack her former boss. It's the questions that Sean Hannity was asking on his show.
Anybody that is looking or seeking a nomination, you're going to be comparing and contrasting your policy positions, your views, what direction you want to take the country with your competitors. Right now, there's former President Trump is the only other candidate for the nomination. We expect many others. Where do you see, if you see, policy differences beyond what you mentioned, which are generational differences? What specific policy areas would you say part with Donald Trump?
What I am saying is I don't kick sideways. I'm kicking forward. Joe Biden is the president. He's the one I'm running against. And what I'm saying is you don't have to be 80 years old to be president. I'm not going to kick sideways. I don't have time for that. That's not my focus.
Yes, of course, Nikki Haley doesn't have time to point out where she differs on policy with President Trump. After all, there's a full year until the first primary. Look, Nikki Haley's going to have to figure out how she can set herself apart from the rest of the potential primary field, or else she might wind up being just a younger Donald Trump who is
Wearing heels.
Thank you all for watching. Elected.